Welcome in, guys, to another scout report, and today we are scouting, going back to the linebackers this time. Yeah, I know, if you're looking at the camera, if you saw the last video, or the last scout report I did, something's happened behind the scenes that I don't want to talk about, that now I have to get a new tripod, so I'm making do with what the fuck I have to do this video. So apologies, the video isn't going to look too good, especially as I've done in the past, but it's just we'll have to deal with it for now. But let's talk about Jared Campbell, linebacker from Alabama. Now you look at this linebacking class particularly, and there's a couple of guys that really stand out to me that I think are getting, again, a lot of people on people's draft boards that I've seen have put Jared Campbell, in the top 10 and stuff like that. I think I put him around about top 12, something like that, in my mock drafts. You can go back and watch it, but I look at this draft because I'm like, when I scouted Jalen Walker a couple of days ago, I'm like, I was more impressed with Jalen. I thought people were sleeping on Jalen Walker, but I'm going to give you my opinion on Jared Campbell. So Jared Campbell from Alabama, Arkansas linebacker. The games I scouted him on were WKU, South Florida, Georgia, Vanderbilt, South Carolina, Tennessee, Missouri, LSU, Mercer, and Oklahoma. They're the games that I scouted him on and I give my opinion on. So let's talk about his strengths. After that. So, his strengths that I like, first thing that really I liked on his tape was his explosiveness on his first jump. His first thing that really caught my eye was him cutting through the A gap against LSU. So you go back to the LSU game, and he was cutting through their offensive line and really getting at them in the protection scheme, and he was scrambling his way to get it to drive the sacks. So he really impressed me in a protection scheme that he was in Alabama, when he was scrambling to sack the tight ends and wide receivers and stuff, and really had that scrappiness about him, which I really did like in the LSU game. Then the other thing that I really liked, one other thing that really I liked on his tape was his coverage instinct. He has that coverage instinct advanced. He has an advanced coverage instinct as an edge player, which is definitely what you need at the NFL level, especially against Georgia, when he was, his interceptions against Georgia were fantastic. His exceptional route recognition from the zone drop was good, which again, fantastic, especially if you're going to go look at some linebackers in the NFL. He was really good at his interceptions against Georgia, and in some exceptional route recognitions from zone drops. And then another thing that I liked as well on his tape was he brings serious. He's a serious pop. He's a serious tackler while maintaining effectively. He has like a 55.5% misses in his tackles in 2024, which is not bad. Again, didn't really care for the stats really, but I love that he's really maintaining his he's got a real aura about him as a tackler. He has a very close. He has a rare speed play. Look at him. He's like 244 pounds, but he has a rare speed. And he can pursue angles, and he can scope out and score. Especially against, if you go and look at the Tennessee game, his acceleration was fantastic against Tennessee. He had that scope and score pursuit his pursuit of the angles and his scoop and score against Tennessee were fantastic. If you want to look at some games that I would say really stood out to me as him being an elite level like linebacker, look at the LSU game and look at the Tennessee game, and obviously the Georgia game, LSU game, Tennessee game. They're the three games that I really was impressed with. And then the other strength here that I liked, a couple more that I'm going to talk about here, but shows natural timing as a blitz, as a blitz runner, and his delayed, especially in another game, especially as a blitzer. You could see that again in the South Carolina game when he was causing the offense to change up and change up the game in the fourth quarter, and then he was putting up like triple sacks in that game against South Carolina. He was putting up some good numbers in that fourth quarter of that game. And then he has a good frame. So he's 6'3", 244 pounds, like I said, but he has a long arm. He has a good distribution in passing in long lanes, which is fantastic. He breaks up multiple plays, especially, and again against Michigan. I saw a couple. Again, he did some great break-up plays and broke up multiple quick transition plays against Michigan with his great frame and his great arm work, and that's what you need in NFL. You need somebody with good arm, with good framework. And then last one I'm going to talk about here is he has a developmental arc. He is one of the youngest linebackers in this class. He's like 21, 20, something like that. But again, he's been really good overall in Alabama this season. He's had an impressive year. And then going to talk a few weaknesses that I picked up on his game that I'm going to talk about. One thing that frustrated me on his tape was his over acceleration, creating vulnerability, over aggressiveness, on creative vulnerabilities against misdirections. So he can be. What I mean by that is it can be a bit too hard on multi-play actions. And then you could see that he was multi-play action fakes against Alabama. He was getting too over aggressive of creating misdirections for the offensive line, which also caused him to do multiple, and he was trying to do multiple play fakes against Alabama, trying to find that creative explosion in play opportunities, and it didn't really work out. And then I was talking about how good his arm, his frame and how good his frame and his long arm are, but one thing that I saw on tape, that he still needs to develop on his hand range when he's in a stack and shed kind of view, when he's in kind of doing that, he's in a stack and shed thing. He's in a stack and shed situation. Again, he was up against some top offensive lines, and like especially going up against like LSU. I said he had to go against LSU and Michigan, but he was latching on a bit. He wasn't able to latch on and control with his hands when he had hold of the ball, especially against the LSU and the Michigan game against the offensive line. And then my other three things that I picked up on here is his pad level. When he's playing, his pad level kind of rises when tackling in space, allowing for extra yards. Apologize. It's like after contact, and then which really should be when he's doing the extra tackles in spaces and giving up extra yards, when he could be driving through with his arm. Like, again, that's something he could work on with whoever like picks him in the draft. With a good defensive coordinator, you can coach it out of him. And then the last one I really want to talk about, and then we'll get to my overall thoughts on Jared Campbell, is his pass rushing plan. Him as a pass rusher, you would have to address that as well. That is something that he needs to work on, his pass rushing. His pass rushing I won't say it's not all bad, but it needs a bit of touching up. It needs a bit of expansion. And then ultimately, he mostly tries to win with his speed and tries to use his speed and bend around the offensive line and the wide receivers and tight end and stuff like that. He kind of still, and another thing, one last thing on the top of what the weaknesses, but he struggles when forced to counterattack against, especially better. So if you're against like an elite tackle, an elite offensive line, like he's gonna really struggle, especially in his pass rushing. With his pass rushing isn't up to par, so you're gonna really have to, when he's up against physical and more, when he's up against a better tackle in the NFL, that's where you're gonna have to really focus on his pass rushing game. Has to be addressed. Wherever he goes, like I said, whatever system he goes in, whatever team he goes to, they have to address his pass rushing, because he's gonna get bullied at the NFL, or they're just gonna fucking destroy, especially with an elite level tackle in the NFL. Like sometimes he's been up against a couple of good tackles, like again at LSU and Michigan, especially the Michigan and the Auburn game, and he was really struggling against some great tackles in college. And then the summary that I want to talk about here, again, I looked at him on tape. He shows some great defensive dynamics, which really you can see that straight as you watch him. He's got some great defensive dynamics. You can play him in different multiple schemes, and then in the LSU game you could see that he can be a great playmaker for a defensive line, he has a great playmaker ceiling, and then he has an explosive range against the screen, against the quarterback screen, and he has great athleticism, which again, his athleticism, okay, he can vote with his hand movements and stuff like that, but his athleticism is great in man coverage, leading up to man coverage, and then he can struggle against linemen. He can get sometimes against some elite tacklers. He can find himself a bit square-footed, and then that ultimately he struggles with his ability to slip and block and close down spaces, and that ultimately hurts him being consistently a threat on the field. But overall, I think again you're looking at Jared Campbell. He's again, people know he's not a top 40 pick. In my opinion, I think he's a top 12 pick. I think again, in my opinion, I think Jalen Walker's got more potential. Maybe I would really impress more with a Jalen Walker, but I'm not saying that Jared Campbell didn't impress me. He did impress me, but I just think people, again, I think there's stuff with like his pass rushing ability has to be improved, and you're gonna have to work with his again work on his pad levels, and his he doesn't have to over aggressive. Don't have to be over aggressive on creating vulnerability plays against misdirect. Again, he does to be so explosive in plays and stuff like that. But overall, he's gonna be. I think he's gonna be a starter in my opinion at the NFL.